Good morning, everyone. We are live on YouTube on the Falcons Podcast, but we're going to be live on Facebook, Atlanta Falcons fans on all Falcons. And I think that's probably it today. We'll go there. Once we bring that one in, we'll get started. And good morning, everybody. This is the Falcons Podcast. We are bright and early this morning. Yes, we're a little early today. We're going at 8 a.m. instead of our usual 9 a.m. I have somewhere to be at 9:30, and I don't want to lose the momentum of all of the things that we have been talking about with the Atlanta Falcons. I know that y'all have a lot on your minds, a lot on your chest, and those are kind of things we want to talk about. On Monday, we talked about some of the top candidates that will be head coaching candidates in 2024. Now, this isn't to say that the Atlanta Falcons will be looking for a head coach in 2024, but if they are, then these were some of the top candidates. So if you haven't seen that one, go ahead and check it out. There's some really good names in there. And I focused on the offensive side of the ball just because I think that's the direction this team will be headed if they will make a change. They went defense with Mike Smith. They went defense with Dan Quinn. Then they turned it around and interviewed mostly offensive guys when they hired Arthur Smith. They've poured a lot of their premium resources with top 10 picks into the offensive side of the ball. I think if they make a change, they will go on the offensive side of the ball. However, today, one of the things I wanted to get into was, all right, it's not over. The team's 4-6 going into a bye. It feels really terrible because, frankly, it's been really terrible. The Atlanta Falcons statistically have had the easiest schedule in the NFL, and they're coming in 4-6. They have, statistically, the easiest schedule for the rest of the NFL season. So when you look at that part of it and you say, okay, well, then they've got a chance to make a run. Well, it hasn't done them any good in the first half of the season, so who knows? We'll see. But it's not all bad is kind of what I wanted to get into today. And what little things could change here and there to turn some of those L's into dubs and salvage the Falcons season. Is a playoff run still available? Yeah, it is in the NFC South. It is. I start looking at overall record, but shoot, 8-9 made the playoffs, won the division last year. Falcons are halfway there. It would take 4-3 to finish 8-9 again, and two of those games are against the team leading the division. So it's not out of the question by any stretch of the imagination. And the other part of it is, I also want to focus on, let's say the Falcons do make a change, how close this team actually is and should be to competing. The long story short, I'll put this in a tweet version, is this team with good quarterback play, and not even good quarterback play, average quarterback play, and I'm not putting this on the quarterbacks, don't get me wrong. I'm talking about the passing game, et cetera, turnovers with the quarterback from the quarterback position. I'm not putting that all on Heineke and Mariota. That can be scheme, that could be offensive line, whatever you want to say. But with the quarterback playing at an average level, this team is at worst 7-3 going into the bye, and probably 8-2 going into the bye with that schedule that they have faced. We want to say thank you to our coffee sponsor, Patrick Wilsey. He does lioncoffee.com. I'm going to take a big slug of this, wet my whistle while we get talking here. So we go live, and I know we're a little early, but we go live because we like to have the interaction with the folks that come in. And I know it's going to be a little bit slower in the chat today because I've moved this up an hour and we've changed up the schedule a little bit. But we got some of our lost sheep trickling in here, and I want to say hello to Jordan Brown over on Facebook. He says, "Good morning, Scott. Do you think if the Falcons beat the brakes off the Aints, we will feel more optimistic, or if it's a short-term feeling?" I think that's a good question. I think the Saints right now, if I'm not mistaken, are leading the division. And if you come out of the bye and you whoop the Saints, who have had your number pretty much, relatively speaking, considering that I think the Saints were the only team the Falcons had a historical lead on in head-to-head matchup in their history. And the Saints have won about 2 out of 3 since Sean Payton arrived, which has been a long time ago. You go out and do that, you get the opportunity to feel like, yes, we have gotten some of those things fixed. But again, that feeling can only could only last 1 week. So the point is you've got to back that up. I mean, remember how we were feeling coming off the Tampa Bay game. Tampa Bay, I think, was leading the division. You go down to Tampa Bay in a place where we didn't necessarily expect to get a win, and you won that one pretty convincingly. That was a fairly, it was 16-13, but the game was dominated. There were turnovers again that kept it close, but that game was fairly well dominated. Then you go to the Titans, who are starting a rookie quarterback, and lose. The Vikings come to Atlanta and start a guy who's a rookie quarterback making his debut, and then are replaced with a guy who just got off the bus that was had for a 7th-round draft pick in the middle of the week, and lose. And then you get the Arizona Cardinals, who are 1-7, 1-8, who are bringing back their quarterback, who is under fire before he even was hurt. Like we've been talking about, will Arizona, with the number 1 pick, if they get it, will they replace Kyler Murray? Is Kyler Murray going to be gone? They want to move on from him. He makes his debut and lose. So you go to the Saints. The Saints come to Atlanta on the 26th. That's Thanksgiving weekend, I think. And let's say you win handily, but that only lasts until you go to New York and then play the Jets. So you're in a place now where you really have to start stacking wins. 9-8 might win this thing, might win the division, especially if it's against the Saints. You take care of your division games, 9-8 will win this division. That's 5-2 on the way out. You've dug yourself a hole by not playing very well. And Keith Robbins comes in. He says, "Good morning, Scott." He has changed his profile pic, and it's not very flattering for Arthur Smith. Good morning, sir. Let me make sure YouTube's in here because we haven't had any YouTube comments. If you're in YouTube, say hello. So far, it's just the Facebook folks coming in, which is great. Love my Facebook fam. And Joe Cannon has come in nice and early today. He says, "Great early morning, Scott, and good morning to you as well." Let's see. Like I said, 9-8 probably wins this thing. Do the Falcons have 5-2 in them? Yes, they do. But again, I just went through, you go through this schedule and you're like, again, your wins, Carolina Panthers, I think they have 1 win on the season. Packers, 25-24 against Jordan Love making his 2nd career start. You beat the Panthers with Bryce Young making his 1st career start. And the only reason you won that one is because Bryce Young was making his 1st career start and was throwing the ball to Jesse Bates. You go and get whooped by the Detroit Lions. They handled their business pretty well. You go and you weren't really competitive against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Dominated. Those 2, I'm giving those as part of the 2. Those are my 2. When I said 8-2 at the beginning, 7-3 at worst, those are my 2. Texans. That was a good win. I said that going in. The Texans had started playing really good ball. We were excited about the win. I said that was probably the best win of the season, and it still is the best win of the season. And I got some fans, some Houston fans came in afterwards, like, settle down. We're just the Houston Texans. No. This isn't just the Houston Texans anymore. That was a good win. The Houston Texans are a good team. You play like that, you're probably 8-2. Again, that's one of the tougher teams you've got on your schedule. And then I mentioned that was C.J. Stroud, another rookie quarterback. Commanders, this is Sam Howell. This is his 1st year starting at quarterback. You go to the Buccaneers, they've got Baker Mayfield, journeyman at quarterback. You win that one, and then I went through the Titans games. I mean, you're not going to ever, maybe in our lifetime, literally in our lifetime, face an easier slate of games than the Falcons are going to have. This might be the easiest schedule the Falcons will ever have. Ever. Coming off of a back-to-back 7-10 seasons where the schedule wasn't hard by any stretch of the imagination. That's what happens when you get last place schedules. You get to play last place teams. And then you pour a ton of resources into the defense, which has paid off. Let's be honest. It has. There's no question the talent level on that side of the ball. You've had 3 years to build your offense and your image, and it's there. You've got 1st-round draft picks at the receivers. You got 1st-round draft picks in the backfield. You have solidified the offensive line. You got big money on the right side with Caleb McGarry and Chris Lindstrom. You got big money on the left side. You've got a 2nd-year starter now at center who showed well at the end, and then you've got you spent a 2nd-round pick on a rookie at left guard. Rookies at left guard should be pretty good, and Bergeron's been okay. Certainly better than Jalen Mayfield was when you went 7-10 in 2021, for God's sakes, and you regress. You've regressed by a record. Now, how does that happen? We'll get into that here in a little bit. So good morning to you, Joe. Chris Walker's coming. He says, good morning, Scott. Really frustrated at the play calling, the apparent inability to pass block, the turnovers, there's the big one, and seemingly inability to get our receivers open early enough to alleviate our pass blocking woes, especially when you're facing stacked boxes. How many of y'all watched the Denver Broncos and Buffalo Bills game? And the final two meaningful plays of the game were a jailhouse blitz. It would have been about a 52-yard field goal. The Broncos are somewhere around the 35, and here comes 7-8 guys. Just swarms Russell Wilson. He doesn't throw the ball out. You can get a grounding or whatever. He just kind of ducks. They did it again the very next play. What's he do? He knows where he's got his streaking receivers, and he just puts the ball up. You want to stack the box against Drake London and Kyle Pitts, give them some shots. Give them some shots one-on-one. They're both basketball players, Drake especially. Show them go up and get a freaking rebound on some guys. You don't need separation on those. Put the ball up and give them a chance to make a play, for God's sakes. But I've said we see so little run after the catch. When the Falcons make a play, I feel like it's always the receivers are stationary. Hook routes, out routes, stop to the sideline, little curls, bubble screens, very little slants, seam routes, posts, streaks. I swear the Falcons never hit their guys in stride, and that's part of it for sure. Mario Lindsay has come in, said morning. Good morning to you as well. And Jordan Brown says, realistically, we might be 2 to 3 losses from changing our outlook on the draft and may want to play for draft position. I had a question. I don't know if Slappy came in here. I invited him in on Twitter. He asked me about 6 questions in a row. I'm not sure if it was last night or this morning, but it was while I was getting ready for this show. And I just put a link in. I'm like, come hit the show, man. These are the places. This is a better place for me to answer these questions. Into the podcast, because other people have some of the same questions as well. And one of those was not being able to get, why can't the Falcons go after a pass rusher? And I'm like, well, they kind of have. Bud Dupree is similar to a Melvin Ingram type. Lorenzo Carter is a veteran guy, but, they got him when they were broke. And then they've put in draft picks. D'Angelo Malone has been a wildly disappointing draft pick for a 3rd-round pick. Arnold Ebiketti's been okay for a 2nd-rounder, but the guy, going out and getting the guy, really hasn't been available. And you ask yourself, Jordan, this is where I'm coming to this, changing your outlook on the draft, if it would have cost you a 1st-round pick and then signing Montez Sweat, would it have been worth it? Well, maybe. I mean, do you think Terry Fontenot in his head is saying, I don't want to make this move because this team's going nowhere and I want to protect my draft position next year and get a cost-controlled guy that I can sink into that defensive line, that edge group, and then not have to pay, $20 million a year for an edge guy? I don't think so, but it's the kind of things that would absolutely cross your mind as a general manager, because you have to be about 3/4 ADD and consider every single possibility. It is literally playing chess and thinking all of the different ways around it. So I'm not sure. And then, and as Jordan says, if we lose games that we should win, again, when we're coming off the Tampa Bay game, we looked at that schedule and said the Falcons might literally be favored in all but one game. The Saints at home, you should be favored. The Jets would be about to push them. The Buccaneers, you just beat on the road. The Panthers are winless. The Colts are sitting there now at 5-5, having won 2 in a row. They were in the midst of a 3-game losing streak when we said that. The Bears, no. At Saints, depending on where they are, maybe you're not favored in that game. But they were favored against the Titans. They were favored against the Vikings. They were favored against the Cardinals. LLL. My, how things change. We've got Rusty Moore coming in with a super chat. Thank you for the support, my friend. He says, if Arthur is coming back next year, I need mistakes to be acknowledged. Trade KP, Kyle Pitts, and draft a quarterback. I have thousands and thousands of dollars spent on Falcons merch, and I'm sick and tired of BS every year. I mean, he acknowledges mistakes. I mean, inaction, you mean. Okay, that makes sense to me now. I need to acknowledge the mistake that drafting a pass-catching tight end when I have no plan at quarterback was a mistake. I was against it. Y'all know I was against it. I'm an Irishman that carries a grudge for a long, long time. I'm still against, and I'll argue for it, and you can say I'm wrong, but I'm not. Against the Julio Jones trade, as great as he was, maybe the best Falcons player ever, with what he did over the years. Now, I think Deion Sanders was probably the best guy to ever put on a Falcons uniform, but he was only there. He wasn't there long enough to do what Julio did. But that draft was made. Julio Jones was drafted with the Falcons coming off of a 13-3 season and then giving up 50 points without forcing Green Bay Packers to punt at home in a playoff game as the number one seed in the playoffs. And you give up 50 points in a game, and your response was to trade 5 picks for a receiver? Well, interesting strategy. Now, it's great. The reason why history has been okay to Dimitroff on that trade is because, 1, Julio Jones hit, and 2, the Cleveland Browns don't know what to do with draft picks. They were awful. You trade those to New England Patriots or Pittsburgh Steelers, and we're talking about a different story. Frankly, for that team, Cam Jordan, who would have been available in the Falcons spot, Cam Jordan would have been a better pick for that team alone. Forget the next 4 picks that you would have made. So what I'm saying here is, if I harp on the Kyle Pitts trade, I'll try not to. I'm still 12 years later talking about that trade. Yeah, you don't want to piss off an Irishman. We don't forget. Kyle Pitts. What can you get for Kyle Pitts now? I feel like a 23-year-old tight end with his skill set, you should still be able to get a first-round pick. If he was just showing up in the NFL draft and going to the combine and going through pro days and all that stuff at 23 years old as a senior right now, he'd probably be a first-round pick, wouldn't he? You'd like to think so. So, quarterback, I think, is number 1 right now. Again, I said earlier, I'm not putting the passing game woes on solely Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ridder. Had Marcus Mariota pop in my head, and Desmond Ridder, but that doesn't mean that they're the answer. We're pretty clear that Taylor Heineke's not the answer. He's got enough background in the NFL that we've got a pretty good feeling about that. I'm not feeling it with Desmond Ridder. We're 10 games into the season, and Des just looks so flustered. And it's not all on him, obviously, but you can tell a lot of the times by the way a ball comes out of the quarterback's hands if it's going to be a completion or not. 9 times out of 10, if it comes out on rhythm and if it comes out, on trajectory without too high or too low, you can tell. You can say, okay, that looks good. I like this one. This looks good. Kind of like, watching baseball. You see a pitch coming in dead center. You're like, all right, Acuna is going to crush this one. You might foul it off, but you got a pretty good idea. I see way too many throws from Ridder that I can tell as soon as he sets his feet that it's got no chance. Ball comes out and it just floats off his hand. You're like, all right, that's an incompletion. Hopefully it's not an interception because the ball, he got under the throw. I'm not feeling it on Desmond Ridder right now. And again, I'm not blaming all this on him, but if you're arrogant enough to ignore the quarterback position until year 3 and then pin your hopes on a third round quarterback, then you reap what you sow. And the Falcons' naivety, arrogance to think that they could build a team in the image of the San Francisco 49ers and just plug and play quarterbacks and the system would take care of itself, it's going to cost some folks their jobs. Plain and simple. It's going to cost some people their jobs. Let me see. Michael is in here nice and early. Man, I was afraid we were going to miss you, Michael. He's in Tucson, Arizona, and is always in here with us. And I moved this up an hour, so he is up bright and early. Want to come back down the chat a little bit, and I want to speed through here because I've missed some folks here lately, and I don't want to miss them anymore. Like Nando coming in says, "Good morning, Scott. We're in bad shape as a franchise because the coaching is very toxic. Think we only win the Panthers game." Well, that gets back into Jordan Brown asking about draft position. If you only win the Panthers game, you could be, let's see, that would be 5 and I cannot get used to 17 games. My brain automatically goes to 16. 5 and 12. 7 and 10 got you the number 8 pick the last couple of seasons. Chicago has 3 wins right now. That would give them 4. Green Bay has 3 wins. LA has 3 wins. Tennessee has 3 wins. Atlanta, if they would tie any of those teams because their strength of schedule is so poor, they would win the tiebreaker again. So a tie with any of those, 5 wins probably has a chance of getting you the number 5 pick. And naturally, because you're the Atlanta Falcons, there seem to be 4 super crazy blue chip picks in this draft. Naturally, Harrison, the offensive tackle over at Penn State, Fashanu, I believe, and then the 2 quarterbacks. But if I'm at 5, I'm looking at trading 2 more first round picks to move into the top 2. Nando, I really am. Andrew Newman, good morning. He says, "Good morning, all. Good morning to you as well." Chris Walker has already chimed in and said hello. Now he says Richie Grant needs to go. I'm not going to argue with that at all. Richie has been a disappointment as well. I liked Richie Grant. I watched him at the Senior Bowl. I watched him in coverage. I watched him doing the one-on-one stuff. And I liked the things he was doing. I also didn't realize he was older. He was like a 5th or 6th year guy. So Richie Grant's about the same age as Jesse Bates is right now. So you're expecting him when I'm using a premium pick on the safety position, he's got to hit. And we're in year 3, and it just hasn't been good. And the part of this that is just heartbreaking, you did get Drew Dahlman out of that trade. So when the Falcons got Richie Grant, they traded out of the number 35 overall spot. They traded out of the 35 spot with the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos drafted running back Javonte Williams, who you saw running like an animal against the Buffalo Bills on Monday Night Football. They got back a 4th, and they got 40. With number 40, they took Richie Grant, and with their 4th round pick, they took Drew Dahlman. Now, what hurts is the very next pick after Javonte Williams, after the pick that the Falcons traded out of, was Javon Holland, safety, Miami Dolphins. Pro Bowler, safety, Miami Dolphins. He didn't make a Pro Bowl. I apologize. I thought he did. I just know he was ranked in the top 5. Top 2 or 3 by Pro Football Focus, should have made a Pro Bowl as a rookie. And that position gets taken care of. And then maybe you don't have to spend, you like having Jesse Bates, but maybe I don't have to spend $15 million on Jesse Bates in order to help sew up that position. And I could have put some more money into a different position. Maybe I could have gone after a free agent edge or something along those lines. Christian Barmore was a DL I really, really liked also, who went number 38 on that defensive line. You were able to get a better version of Barmore for Onyemata for a good price. So, that works out okay. But that one stings a little bit. But I think it's balanced itself out because you've hit on the center position with Drew Dahlman. So you ended up with Dahlman, ended up being the better of the picks. But Richie Grant is struggling mightily. Can't blame the coaching on this one. We got a pretty good defensive backs coach. He just might not be it, unfortunately. And we've had enough time. Dave coming in on YouTube saying, "Good morning, Scott." Good morning, Dave. I invited Nick. As y'all know, Nick is in Seattle. And I invited him. I said, "Listen, I'll send you the link. If you want to join me, join me." He said, "I'll probably do it around 5:30 a.m. his time." God bless him. He may join us. He may not. Otherwise, it'll just be us, which is okay with me. That's why we're here with the Falcons fam and our guests. Keith Robbins asked, do we think there's something wrong with Bijan Robinson mentally, physically, or is it just the play calling? There's more to it than that, Keith. I don't think there's anything wrong with him. And I don't even necessarily think it's the play calling, so to speak. They're absolutely force feeding the ball to Bijan. It felt like they were doing it at the beginning of the season. They were becoming a little obvious, where if you keyed on Bijan, you stop the Falcons. And my question on that is, well, Arthur Smith doesn't trust the quarterback, doesn't trust the passing game, hasn't trusted him in 2 years. Excuse me, didn't trust Marcus Mariota, hasn't trusted Desmond Ridder, doesn't trust Taylor Heineke. Well, whose fault is that? Again, I'll say it again, y'all. Arthur Smith does not get a pass on the quarterback position who's playing there because he was hand in hand with Terry Fontenot in choosing the quarterback. And going in the quarterback, or at least he's doing a really good job of covering for him. When you decide to take a pass-catching tight end, when you got a 36-year-old quarterback on a bad contract and creaky knees, you're making a mistake. Again, well, Justin Fields is a bust, Scott. Fine. Okay, he is. I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying, even if I agree with you, would you be in any worse shape right now with Justin Fields? Because of where the Chicago Bears are right now, they're going to get a top 2 pick, be able to get a quarterback if they want to. And Justin Fields has shown enough they can probably spin him off for a first-round pick and change. Can we say the same thing for Kyle Pitts? Would the record be any better? 7-10, 7-10, 4-6? Seriously, where would you be better off? Where would you be hurting worse if you had taken Justin Fields? You wouldn't have. You wouldn't have, because taking a pass-catching tight end when you've got no plan at quarterback, no offensive line, and a leaky defense is a luxury pick that you couldn't afford to make. I already said hello to Michael. Good to see you. Oh, and going back to Keith, I don't think there's anything wrong. I think because you do not trust the passing game, and this is what I was going with this. Apologies. I interrupted myself instead of Nick this time. Because this team is being penalized, there's so many negative plays between the sacks and the penalties. This team, when you do not trust the passing game at all, cannot play from second and long. They just can't. What is second and long to this team? It's a handoff to make it 3rd and 8, to make it 3rd and 9. And they don't throw the ball. What was the average target depth going into the 4th quarter for the Falcons last week? It was 2.9 yards, I think. That's ridiculous, man. That's ridiculous. You got 15 completions and you got 50 yards. They finished with 70 yards passing. 70 yards passing should be a John O. Smith screenplay, except that should go to Kyle Pitts, where he breaks a tackle on a slant and outruns the coverage. That's what 70 yards of passing should look like. It's just, this team last year, one of the reasons they overachieved is because the turnover battle, and they were the least penalized team in the NFL. This year, if they get inside the red zone, 1st and 10 is going to be either 1st and 15 or 1st and 20, like freaking clockwork. And those are the kind of things you say it's discipline and coaching. That I need to tap into some of my contacts, because I don't have an answer for that. I can talk to you about, upgrading personnel and why this guy isn't the right guy. But as far as how do I get my offensive line to stop committing penalties, I don't know. The coaching hasn't changed. The scheme hasn't changed. The personnel hasn't changed. So why are they getting penalties inside the red zone every single time, assuming that they're legit and it's not just, hey, it's the Atlanta Falcons and we don't want them to win, NFL refs, which I'm not going to buy into. So, Keith, Bijan Robinson is seeing 8 guys in the box because the Falcons can't throw the ball. With 70 yards of passing, I don't care who your running backs are. It's going to be tough to run the ball. It's going to be tough to be complimentary. Andrew Newman, he says, instead of sticking with how the team was built to run the ball and don't take shots. Exactly. That's how they're playing. And it's frustrating. I get it. Jasmine, good to see you. Hope you are enjoying this lovely fall Wednesday in Atlanta. Dave asked a question. Is there a difference between play calling or play design? Because you just nailed Arthur Smith's concepts. Yeah, there is. There absolutely is. And again, I don't watch, and I guess I'll start. I owe it to y'all to start watching the All 22 on this, where I can start seeing, is every route either 5 streaks down the line where everybody's just running away from the quarterback, or is it all a bunch of button hooks? I just, again, every time I see a pass completion, it's with a guy standing still. There's got to be, and this is what I need Nick for, there's got to be a stat out there that is for yards after the catch, cumulative by team. And that would be skewed by, well, you only have 1,000 passing yards, so you're obviously going to have less runs after the catch. But I'm sure Nick will be able to figure this out for me because he's just getting here. I'm going to throw this on him. Nick, it is good to see you. Nick, I've got a homework assignment for you.
Okay.
And good morning, by the way.
Thank you.
I want to see, and they've got to be adjusted for, total passing yards, et cetera, but yards after the catch as a percentage of passing. Like, who is good at getting guys the ball in motion and making plays after, and who is not? I know my seat of the pants analytics tells me the Falcons are absolute garbage at running after the catch. I've seen it of getting their playmakers the ball and then making plays. We saw it with Jonnu Smith on a screen, and about the only time it ever happens is on a screen. I've seen Kyle Pitts maybe twice in his career catch the ball in stride and really open up and just be that gorgeous gazelle he can be at 6'6", running down the field and running away from guys. I haven't seen Drake London be able to catch it in stride and shed a tackle, because we might have all the most separation in the world, but he's a big, strong kid that should be able to break a tackle from a 195-pound corner. So when we talk about difference between play calling and play design, I just don't feel like there's ever any guys hit in stride, hit in motion for the play. Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel that as well. It's hard with space and stuff. Like, are your guys outside of Bijan Robinson truly yak creators? Because they're good athletes, straight line, but I don't know if they're exactly sudden and built like running backs, so to speak. Like, I always think of the San Francisco 49ers as the golden example of when you're looking for a yak, and each of them is built like, 6'2", 215 pounds. But I agree with you overall.
What was the nickname for Michael Thomas?
The nickname for Michael Thomas, slot boy or slant boy.
God.
Oh, well,
that was what he was. Jerry Rice made a living on slants. I mean, and Jerry Rice he wasn't stocky, but he was strong. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like I already mentioned Ronald Acuna, or, a guy like Tiger Woods. Those guys can hit the ball. They're so much stronger than their physique might tell you. That Jerry Rice was one of those guys. If they had the kind of test that they do now, you'd be like, oh yeah, his core strength was off the charts or whatever. But
I do have a statistic. If you are curious about it, for individual players, yak per reception, probably better than overall yak. Would you rather have the cumulative stat or the efficiency stat?
I would rather have an efficiency, and I'd like to see it for the team, because I feel like the Atlanta Falcons would be way, way low.
They are low overall for individuals, but you do have Jonnu Smith pretty high for the
and one of those was from a 70-yard screenplay.
Exactly. It still counts though in the sample size. It'd be hard to not include that because everybody's would as well. But from a team perspective, I probably can get that as well. But if I'm looking at just Atlanta for that play, you have. Let me see. We got it right here. Yak per reception. Yeah, everybody is low besides Jonnu Smith. If you're looking at just tight ends and wide receivers, out of 15 minimum targets, Jonnu Smith 7.46 yak per reception, but then it plummets after that. Matt Collins 3.24, and especially Kyle Pitts and Drake London 2.94 and 2.55. Those show up red, so probably in the 10th to 25th percentile range.
Like I said, I call it seat of the pants analytics. This is what my eyes are telling me, and then I back it up with people who are actually crunching the numbers. And we know that Drake London and Kyle Pitts do not get the ball in stride. They're either jumping or turning and absorbing. And then they've got guys all over them. Winston, he says, good morning, Scott, and the chat as well. Stephen Womble says, thinking it may be too much on Art Smith to be head coach and play caller. Maybe all being a first-time head coach. Andy Reid has been around. There's guys that do both. Sean McVay, Andy Reid. There's Sean Payton has done it. But, Sean McVay had instant success and everybody was looking. He's kind of the exception. Shane Steichen's doing it right now, but he had a lot of experience calling plays before he got to the Colts. That this may be a lot on him. But again, who are you going to hand it to? Dave Ragone? I don't know. I don't know. And as Daniel Mitchell says, I've said this since week 5, we don't know which team will show up. And unfortunately, the last 3 weeks, it's been the one that gives away the ball and untimely turnovers and or penalties. Cummings Jr. Wallace says, it's all Arthur Smith's fault. Acknowledge me. Acknowledge that. Cummings, I would suggest you go watch Monday's show where we started. It was basically, this is why the Falcons might need to make a change, and these are the guys that could come in and replace them. Today we're talking about a little bit on how these things can turn around, how the Falcons really aren't that far off, and it may be Arthur Smith's fault. He's incapable of doing it, but with the right tweaks here and there, this could be a 9-8 team, and 9-8 could win the division. We haven't really gotten into that yet. One of the things wanted to, and I talked about the Julio Jones trade, and he says that Tuggle, Jesse Tuggle, Tommy Nobis, Mike Ken, and Claude Humphreys were our best players. Tuggle's my all-time favorite Falcon, but as far as pure talent on the field, it's Dion. I mean, Dion's one of the best players to ever play this game. And as far as the best player, I still think it's Julio Jones for an extended period of time. As much as I love Tuggle, Tuggle to me is, who's your favorite? Who's number one on the Mount Rushmore? I think it probably goes to Tuggle and Nobis on there. But as far as we're talking just pure talent, if I'm looking at Madden and building an all-time team, Julio and Dion are probably going to be the top two in there with their scores. Then Morton Anderson might be a 99 though.
Maybe.
All right. Wanted to show you all this stat. This piece that Taryn, looks like her name is Whack. Taryn Whack put in. I'll drop it in the chat here real quick. That she put together. Because you look at it and it'll probably make you mad. Let's be honest. It's probably going to make you mad because she put together, and just in a nice, easy way to look at all of them, the stats and where they rank overall. We talked last week, Nick, can this team go from a number of 15? They were the 15th scoring offense. We talked at the beginning of the year. This is the 15th ranked scoring offense in the NFL at like 21.7. A field goal up to 24.7 would have put them in the top 10. Is this a team that can get into the top 10? Yes, they should have been. That should have been worth a field goal when you're talking about a third year, an upgrade at left guard, a third year in the system, and drafting a running back with a go for it now type of mentality. Everybody's another year in the system. And for yards, and this is after, they were up to 11. They were at 11 going into the Arizona game in total offense. They dropped to 15th. Yards per play is only 19th. Rushing yards per game, 7. Per play is 14. Passing yards is down to 21. Passing yards per play, and where it starts going down here is points per game is down to 24 from 15 to 24. Their third down efficiency is actually not that bad, believe it or not, at 12th. Red zone is middle of the pack. Goal to go, they're tied for 27th on first and goal. And why does that happen? Penalties. First and goal is a penalty. And this is where it shows up. Right here, y'all. 27th on first and goal, Nick. And then the interceptions is middle of the pack. Not too bad, but especially the interception rate, because you're not putting the ball up as much as other people. So you're not necessarily throwing as many, but the fumbles, to put those in there too. And then you're 26 in sacks per pass attempt. So you're taking more sacks than most teams but overall, that looks like an average offense for the most part. It looks about average, except for the points, which comes down into the penalties, which comes down into that first and goal.
Yeah, and not only are you struggling in the first and goal area of the field, which is obviously huge. Red zone scoring is down across the league, so you are bad against a regressed sample as well. But you are also pretty poor in the explosive play rate. So not only is it hard for you to punch it in for 7 when you do have a 10-play drive, but your ability to hit those 20, 30 plus yarders, a lot of times those explosive ends up in points as well, is pretty poor. Explosive play rate of 9.1%, 20th in the NFL. So yeah, it's an odd situation for the Falcons right now. You are significantly more efficient under center in your offensive structure, but you have quarterbacks who don't seem like they are as comfortable there. You're one of the teams that I would be surprised if the Falcons don't have the highest rate of pistol calls in the NFL. It's actually your highest stat as far as where the quarterback lines up in your offense with 212 plays out of it, 41% of your offensive snaps out of pistol, and 130 out of shotgun, and your EPA per play rank out of pistol is 20th. Your EPA per play rank out of shotgun is 26th. So I don't know. Arthur Smith has this data. I am beyond doubt. I don't know why they continue to do that if it's the quarterbacks are that uncomfortable in the under center stuff. But it seems night and day what you're good at and what you're not when it comes to where the quarterback lines up.
And when you've got questions at quarterback and I see them go empty on a 3rd and less than 3, I want to fire him right there. I want to fire him on the spot when I see that team go empty. Well, Bijan's in the slot, and that's where they're going to target. It's a hell of it easier to turn around and hand him the damn ball if you've got them spread out than it is to try and throw an out route or an arrow or something like that. And you've got your other 2 guys out there. You don't trust your quarterback and you go empty. I mean, to me, that's a fireable offense. Stephen B comes in with the debate on this. We were talking about Kyle Pitts, and if you acknowledge mistakes, trade Kyle Pitts. Would that be the right move? Can you? And Nick, I'm assuming you can still, again, if he was coming into the draft right now and went to pro days and the NFL Combine at 23, he'd be a first-round pick. So maybe you can still get a first-round pick for him. But he says, why trade a guy with all pro tools for a first-round pick? Pitts is the kind of talent you roll the dice on. The Falcons should extend ASAP. Nick, what would you think is the merits of that argument or the argument against?
I think that he probably still would rather. It's kind of a tough situation, actually, because you can get a new contract with more guaranteed money when you've already had one big injury. Maybe you jump at that, but also he's probably somebody who might want to bet on themselves another year rather than signing that big contract. You just mentioned how young he is and the talent. Maybe he would say, yeah, we'll roll the dice here. It's tough to say. You never know what that person's wired like. If you put, millions of guaranteed dollars in front of them, some guys are just going to sign right away. And also you have the ability to hold out then if you play great. And it's like, actually, this contract isn't good anymore. Sorry. I don't feel bad for teams when that happens with players. But I think he would probably wait and want a little bit more money unless you offered him money based on projection still, which is a dangerous game.
Right, when you're basing on stuff that he hasn't done. But Stephen B, the question is, if the Falcons should extend ASAP, well, it takes 2 to tango, brother. And he might not want to. Now you approach, if this is what you feel like he's a big part of our future. He's 23 years old. He has all the tools in the world. Then you're starting to approach him next year about a contract extension. And then you see where his representatives are. And if he wants top 5 type of money as a wide receiver, which he is, that's where you start the negotiations. Then you start getting on the phone. You start getting on the phone with other teams because you risk losing him for nothing and spending the number 4 pick, the highest pick ever on a tight end, and getting jack squat out of it in his 4+ years of being in Atlanta, except losing seasons. Because you're going into year 4 right now, and you still don't know what the hell you're going to do at the quarterback position.
Yeah.
Which is why it made it so dangerous to draft him there to begin with. And want to go down here. Go ahead, Nick.
That isn't just a Falcons problem, right? That's the one thing about the NFL in general. The quarterback can't do it alone, but if you don't have the quarterback, you're sunk. But at the same time, it's always the risk of, imagine if you ended up taking Justin Fields or Trey Lance at 4 or whatever. Obviously, they weren't. Trey Lance wasn't available, but you don't have that Kyle Pitts, and those 2 quarterbacks don't look very good right now. Then you miss that opportunity. But at some point, you have to take a shot, unless you just get lucky and hit the lottery on a day 3 quarterback or something, which is no way to make a living. That's like, okay, if I don't win this scratcher ticket, I'm going to starve. Okay, good luck.
Can you eat it?
Yeah. No nutritional value there. But at some point you have to take a shot. And if you miss, everybody's fired. But if you don't take a shot, probably eventually everybody's fired. So that's the that's the tough part of the NFL. That's one reason that you see guys like Nick Saban or even Frank Reich be good program builders in college, but they get to the NFL. Obviously, there's the dynamic between the grown men versus college players, but also in the NFL or in college, you can kind of overcome the lack of a quarterback. In the NFL, if you don't have it, you're done.
Greg Mundine, apologize if I get your name wrong, Greg. He says, I wonder how the general manager feels he didn't select Smith as his coach. Yeah, that's something to think about as well. And I think Terry Fontenot will survive no matter what happens with Arthur Smith. But Joe comes back. He says, if we end up with another top 10 pick, is Smith still the coach next year? And will Dave Ragone be fired to save Smith's job? I think you're onto something there, Joe. Smith might be able to save his job by quietly saying, hey, we're going to bring in we're going to bring in an offensive coordinator that is it's going to be his offense. The question is then, what offensive coordinator can you get worth his salt would want to come in to take the job from the head coach? That would become an interesting dynamic. And how often does that happen, Nick?
A lot of times if you see that happening, the end is nigh. So I can't think of an example at the top of my head where you see a guy survive and do that. I'm sure it's happened, and I'm sure it's happened successfully as well. But it is a weird dynamic for sure. It'd have to be somebody that has a good relationship with Arthur Smith. I think there has to probably be some past between them, and they'd have to trust Arthur Smith not to be too meddlesome. It's still his team. That still will probably be within the parameters of what he wants to execute and what he wants it to look like. So there'd have to be some familiarity there. On paper, outside of the quarterback position, which always makes it tough because, again, if you don't have it, you're not going anywhere. But there are still building blocks on this team. I mean, it's been worse this season overall, but you got the makings of a solid offensive line. You got weapons on offense. It wouldn't be that hard to even add another piece to the offense as well. I mean, it doesn't have to be a first-round pick. Should have, an extra day 2 pick and one of the best wide receiver draft classes we've seen since 87. I think Scott was the draft he pulled up there. Or maybe it was 96.
I think it ended up being 90 or 91 was the top draft class. When we started talking about the top, Nick said it looks like one of the top wide receiver classes maybe ever. And I was like, well, that's a bold statement. So I started going back and I got back to like 13 years of let me see. I think I closed it though. It was
Keyshawn Johnson, Terrell Owens.
There was like 7 or 8 guys that had 8,000 yards or more in the NFL, which was as many as I found in 30 years.
Muhsin Muhammad was in there as well.
Muhammad was a beast at Carolina. Yeah. Falcons fans know that as well as anybody. You kind of sleep on him as far as who some of the really, really good wide receivers were. He was really, really good in Carolina.
Yeah. Well, this upcoming wide receiver class is very, very highly thought of from the talent at the top perspective, obviously, and the depth. And the Falcons are horrible out of 11 personnel. I know you did like a pick swap for Van Jefferson, but I mean, he shouldn't keep you from.
No, and he's been in the game. He's one of the key guys on the team now. He was being cut from the Rams, who are 3-6.
Yeah, but the 22nd ranked EPA per play out of 11 personnel, 28th ranked in EPA per pass. I mean, you're just not exposed to there, and that's as much a quarterback stat as anything. But still, it's an area that you could look at. We got Rusty Moore Jr. coming in saying, I know you've talked about this before, but what are your thoughts on the draft picks so far? Obviously, they have been bad, but who is making them? Arthur Smith or Terry Fontenot? I think that probably Fontenot probably still gets the. I don't know what's going on here. Probably gets the credit / blame for the draft picks.
I can't find. Sorry,
should be at the bottom.
The tab I had open that I was showing y'all started auto playing.
Oh, all right.
Well. Auto playing a video. Apologies.
But I don't think Bergeron's been poor, so to speak. He's out there, rookie offensive lineman, but not terrible. And I think Bijan has not been terrible as well with the opportunities he's had. Harrison doesn't look great right now, but 3rd round defensive lineman, probably want to see what it looks like, a year from now, 2 years from now. So expecting your rookies to come in and make a massive difference right away is probably a little bit faulty, other than using a top 10 pick on a running back.
Yeah, I just wondered if Rusty was asking for the 3 drafts overall. Talking about what do you think about our draft picks period under this regime?
Yeah.
And you go back to Kyle Pitts, Richie Grant, Jalen Mayfield. Wasted pick, bust. Darren Hall was in the 4th round. He's gone. Drew Dahlman was a solid pick. Taquan Graham was a solid pick at 5. Avery Williams was a solid pick in the 5th round too. I want to bring that thing back up, and hopefully it won't interrupt the stream again. But we went back into, I had it up there long enough on the defense where you could see some of the things in there. And I feel like we've talked about the pressure was going to tell on this team, the lack of pressure. The Falcons just still cannot get any pressure on the quarterback with a 4-man rush. They just flat out can't do it. That has to be, other than upgrading the passing game with the quarterback position, if that's where you self-scout and say, this is where it's killing us, and I'm talking about from a front office point of view. I'm not talking about on the field. I'm not talking about Arthur Smith self-scouting. I'm talking about someone from up top, like Terry Fontenot, and his scouts looking down and saying, okay, Arthur Smith's wrong. Des ain't it. We've got to go get a quarterback, whether he likes it or not. And there might be a power struggle in there a little bit overall. But you go down, if I go down to special teams on that chart, and it's all the special teams now, punt returns, net punt, all of them are like 32 now. They're dead last. And I said in the offseason, and then I said it again watching another set, whether it was Mike Hughes, whoever was filling in for him, I don't remember who it was, Scotty Miller, missing punts, not fielding punts, fielding them on the 5. Avery Williams is a big miss for this team. And that was a good pick for a 5th rounder, drafted to be a specialist, and he led the league in punt return yardage last year. That's 15, 16, 17 yards a game in net field position. Well, when you're only getting 350 yards of total offense, that's about 5%? It's about 5%. It's a 5% increase in your offense, in your field position, because he's only returning 1 punt a game. It's hard to return punts these days, Nick. The punters are just too damn good. But he was averaging 16 yards on about 17, 18 punt returns a game. And now it's a liability. The ball's bouncing and rolling. That's been a big miss. But the big problems are the turnovers and the penalties. If you can clean those up, and you hear him say it every week. And Nick, I don't know the answer to this. And I'm gonna like I said, I'm gonna tap into some of my coaching contacts. How do you get offensive linemen to stop committing penalties other than to change them?
Advertise it in practices, and if you do, bring in the refs that are calling it in the practices as well. And if they are making mistakes, then they are getting benched or getting fined or getting having to run some windbreakers. So those are some areas where it's possible. I mean, I've been there, and I remember a coach in my ear for holding, but other than that, I can't really say. And it's the issue is too, if you're pulling off offensive linemen, it gets pretty treacherous there because there's just not enough offensive line depth. But if you really want to send a message, I think the answer is probably at the end of the day benching them. But that's a risky proposition.
Dave says, I'm having nightmares of Ryan Tannehill in 2024. I think he's available, isn't he? I mean, he could. They didn't cut him, but they benched him. I mean, if they wanted to do that, I think they probably would have. Lindstrom got paid and became worse compared to last year. That's on the coaching staff and players not wanting to be disciplined for their head coach. Talking about the penalties and stuff. Stewart just says, Arthur Smith just can't coach, flat out. What I like about Arthur Smith is the culture, the mentality that he's brought to this team. The man management, I think, again, I can't underestimate that these guys typically, for a team that's been hard to do, have played hard for him on some bad teams. That's not easy to do. I like that. I don't like the stubbornness, the unearned arrogance, the pettiness, and that type of thing. And that's just personality speaking. Mm-hmm. And I really, really don't like, again, we talk about, is it play calling? Is it personnel? He doesn't get a pass on personnel. That's what it boils down to me. I gave Mike Smith a pass on personnel. I gave Dan Quinn a pass on personnel. We don't need a defense. We've got a defensive head coach. We'll just pour all of our resources into offensive skill players, including our money and our draft picks. That was Thomas Dimitroff, and they left the defense to hang out to dry. This is on Arthur Smith. It's on Arthur Smith who's out there.
Yeah, it's at the end of the day, the buck stops there. It is an Arthur Smith thing, and he still has a chance to turn this around if they can get it. They have a bye week now. It's still not
What's
a
it
crazy.
take? What's the number where he's gone, and what's the number where he comes back?
I think you need to make the playoffs.
You
I think
do.
I think you need to make the playoffs. Or if you let's say you lose in a tiebreaker down the stretch, but you end up with 10 wins, then maybe that's something where, if you have a lot of momentum entering and are playing good football, then we can talk about that. But current path you're on would be he's gone. And Scott, I just did find the stat for that. It'd be a little bit surprising. I think a lot of it's because of how quickly
Jonnu
they get
Smith.
the ball out, and Jonnu Smith stuff. Also, a big part is the running backs.
The
Just
screen
in general,
plays,
when
the
you
short
use
passing game.
running backs,
Mhm.
you're going to have higher yak. But I did finally find the Falcons rank in yak. They're actually 5th in the NFL at 496 yards. But again, I can't filter it to wide receivers.
Now I was gonna say, now show me
only.
my receivers. Now
That's-
show me now show me on targets 5 yards past the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, I don't have the. I wish I had the sports info solution. If somebody wants to drop the $60 a month subscription for that for me, then God bless you. But I only have some other aspects, but they are 5th. I would assume, based on the individual data that we looked at there.
It's all the short passing game behind the line of scrimmage. When you're going to have some, when you've got 70 yards and don't throw the ball past the line of scrimmage, you've got 70 yards after the catch. Daniels Mitchell says, cannot believe Smith is allowed to stay. He really needs an offensive coordinator, but I think he'll be too arrogant to hire one. Yeah, I think that would be admitting failure on his part. And I'm not sure that he is allowed to stay. And you may be right now. Had an article titled, don't expect any big changes during the bye week. And someone's like, well, what big changes would you expect? I'm like, well, there's a lot of folks out there thinking that firing the coach during the bye week would be a big change.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that to happen. And getting back to what you said, I think 8-9 might save his job. Now, that might make the playoffs, depending on who those 4 wins come against. It made the playoffs for the Buccaneers last year. But at 8-9, Falcons fans, I think I know where you're leaning on where to go on this. I think 7-10, you've got a problem. I'd be leaning towards you're gone. 8-9 for me is the number where I think he'd be 9-8. He's safe. That's a 5-2 run down the stretch. 8-9 questionable. 8-9 we've got big questions. 7-10, and there's going to be people calling for heads.
Yeah, and I just wanted to correct that real quick, Scott. I was in the rushing stats. So you're 5th in yards after contact, not at yard. Why would yak be 2 different things? God bless. Yards after contact and yards after catch. You're 21st in yards after catch. So that lines up a little bit more. Okay, we were trying to figure it out there. The yards after catch, broken tackles, that makes sense. Or yards after your contact, but yards after catch pretty low. So there we go.
Dave says, Scott, what are your impressions of the pressers for Coach Nielsen and Coach Gray? I find them to be very refreshing. Dave, I haven't watched a ton of those, to be honest with you. If they were to have made a change during the season, I think Nielsen would have been promoted to head coach. I would promote Coach Gray to interim defensive coordinator, and Ragone would probably be the offensive coordinator, and you backfill from there, and then you start looking at draft picks. But I don't think that's gonna. I don't. Again, when I mentioned Richie Grant, Dave, Coach Gray is a really good coach. Coach Nielsen's a really good coach. You're getting the coaching on the defensive side of the ball. I don't have a lot of excuses for Richie Grant right now, but when we mention, you start looking at Tankathon again. The Falcons are sitting at number 9 on the at draft pick right now. They're in the top 10 again. Biggest needs on this team: quarterback, edge. I'm going to go ahead and say edge again.
Interior defensive line, Grady Jarrett.
Wide receiver.
Yeah.
I think the interior defensive line's okay. They're just hurt.
It's a developmental position, and Grady Jarrett and Calais Campbell are pretty damn old, and so is David Onyemata. That's one where you probably need to start thinking.
If I'm running 2 guys, Kentavious Street played pretty well. Taquan Graham is right there. I've got Grady Jarrett. I've got David Onyemata. 1, 2, 3, 4. If I decide to play inside like that, I'm okay there compared to Richie Grant, compared to Bud Dupree, who's on a 1-year contract, by the way. Lorenzo Carter, 1-year contract, by the way. Arnold Ebiketie and D'Angelo Malone, I got problems at edge. I need 2 edges before I really worry for me about the interior line. I'm okay there.
Yeah.
And I'm talking, and again, I'm not talking about where would I go, assuming I had 5 players all at the same skill set when my pick comes up. I've got my pick of whatever position I want. I've got 10 guys. Every position's on the board. I'm going quarterback first.
Yeah.
I'm going edge second. I might go edge again. Wide receiver.
Cornerback.
Corner, safety, defensive back there.
Yeah.
As well. And I'm pretty happy with my linebackers. I'm pretty happy, especially when Troy Anderson comes back. Nate Landeman's been really good. Unrestricted free agent. He's been really good this year.
Yeah. I just think more the defensive tackle spot is a 4-year building block plan. So you want to take one before you need it. But you need things immediately. But you're correct. And Young Hoku is 48% of the team points this year.
Young Wei Koo.
Okay. Young Wei Koo has 48% of the team's points this year. Yeah, I don't know how that would rank compared to your peers overall, but that does seem like it would be pretty high.
Excited to see what Joe Brady does with the Bills. He was a head coaching candidate for us in 2021, which made me angry, which made me really angry. You want to talk about privilege, for God's sakes. In 2019, that guy was fetching coffee for Sean Payton. In 2020, he's got Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. And in 2021, he's a head coaching candidate. Oh, I was like, you got to be freaking kidding me. This is every once in a while, there's stuff that happens where I'm convinced that guys just lose their mind. That Christian Ponder draft was in the NFL. I'm like, the general managers have gone quarterback crazy again. They've absolutely just lost their minds. Joe Brady was one of those times. I'm like, they're so desperate to find the next Sean McVay that they're doing this. It's like Michigan going to try and get the towel boy to play receiver because the water boy was having such success with the Southeast Louisiana Mud Dogs. It was pretty insane. But yeah, I think it's, again, we can talk about fireable offenses. Fireable offense number 1 is you've been in the job for 3 years, and arguably the 2 biggest indicators for success of a football team, quarterback and pass rush, have been the weakness of this team since you've been here, and they have not been. I'd say edge has been addressed. It just hasn't gotten any better. They've drafted edges. They've tried. Mm-hmm. They haven't signed anybody really. Yeah. Taking a shot on a guy like Montez Sweat, Chase Young, but they have tried with a top 40 pick on Arnold Ebiketie, the 3rd round pick on Malone, but the quarterback position, banking your job on a 3rd round pick who has not taken a snap in the NFL, partially because you didn't let him until the last 4 games of his rookie season, could cost you your job. It could absolutely cost you your job. Nick, what are your final thoughts as we roll on out of here?
Season's not over yet. This is a team coming from somebody who's a Broncos fan. It feels like the season is, kaput, and then things change. It's a very reactionary week by week league, which makes it one of the best sports and fandoms in all of sports, right? Just NFL in general, you're flying by. So it is not, Nick always says the season isn't over yet. It could be, but you still have games to play. And the final analysis is not here. We still have to gather the rest of the data, the rest of the sample size. So this is a team that could turn it around still. You have everything in front of you still. This is not a tough schedule or division. The Saints and Buccaneers are exceedingly mid, if we can use some Gen Z language there. So that's I would say it's not over quite yet. And if you want to pull out the pitchforks and the torches, that's fine. But I think the best thing, you can't control it. Sit back. We'll see how it plays out. And then once the season has concluded, we can really go over everything from there.
Here's a reminder to everybody. Nick did not grow up an Atlanta sports fan. He's not nearly as cynical and realistic as the rest of us who grew up in Atlanta. I've been here. I was moved to Atlanta when I was 5 years old. So I've been here since 78 on and off. And it is tough. And again, when you mentioned it's a developmental position, and the interior defensive line, I'm like, oh, somebody just say Jalen Carter in the chat, and let's just set everybody off. That was my pick. My 3 first-round picks for this regime were trade down, Justin Fields, Kyle Hamilton, Jalen Carter. Those were my options. And again, for the Drake London pick, I wanted to trade down again. There were several receivers that went after him. I think Garrett Wilson went in there. Chris Olave went in there. George Pickens went in the second round. Christian Watson went in the second round. Alec Pierce went in the second round. Drake London is good. But, again, all the questions there. But Jalen Carter, yeah, he's right now that's looking like a really, really bad mistake and it was low risk for Philly because they could risk it. They could afford to risk it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Eddie comes in just talking about the week schedule. Again, they've got the weakest schedule on the way out, but they've had the weakest schedule on the way in. And I don't think the remaining 7 games are going to be easier than the first 10. So you better get it together. On that note, we're going to get out of here. Nick and I will be back tomorrow morning on youtube.com/milehighhuddle if you want to join us to talk some Denver Broncos, who have all of a sudden switched places in the last 3 weeks with the Atlanta Falcons. And then we'll be back on Friday. We'll start looking at some playoff options for teams. We'll start looking at some draft options for the other teams. And then we'll be back on Monday. So we are here Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on these channels. And then we are on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday on Mile High Huddle. But we're here all the time. Appreciate y'all being here. Want to say again, thank you to Rusty coming in with our super chat. He says he came in earlier before Nick got here. So thank you for the support of the show. We are going to get out of here. Appreciate y'all being here. Enjoy a following week 11 of NFL football and college football. We'll see y'all later.